America has always had this restless heart. From the very beginning, we've been a nation on the move. And I'm not just talking about people coming from other countries, but movement within our own borders. It's this constant internal migration that is one of the most powerful and honestly often overlooked forces that shapes just about everything in the United States. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to kick things off with what internal migration even means. Then we'll jump back in time to look at the huge historic waves that really set the stage. We'll zoom in on the massive, and I mean massive, shift from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. Check out where people are heading right this minute. And finally, we'll connect all the dots to see how this constant movement shakes up our politics, our economy, and even the environment. All right, let's start with the big picture. We're talking about a force that quietly reshapes the country. But what are we actually talking about here? And that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's never just about wanting a better view. People are constantly being pulled by the promise of opportunity or pushed out by some kind of necessity. And if you can understand those forces, you can understand a whole lot about America. So let's get a clear definition. Simply put, internal migration is any move that happens inside a country's borders. It could be that huge, life-changing move from, say, New York to Texas, or it could be something as common as moving from an apartment downtown out to a house in the suburbs. It all counts. And this is exactly why it matters so much. We're talking about way more than just U-Hauls on the highway. This constant shuffling of people is what redraws our economic map, it shifts political power between states, and it literally changes the American landscape, one moving truck at a time. But look, to really get where we're going, you first have to understand where we've been. The migration patterns we see today didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They're actually echoes of these giant historical movements that came way before. You can really break it down into three huge game-changing waves. First up, you've got westward expansion, back in the 1800s. This massive push fueled by the dream of cheap land and, of course, the gold rush. Then, starting around 1910, came the Great Migration. This is where about 6 million Black Americans left the rural South to find industrial jobs and a new life in northern cities. And finally, right after World War II, the rise of the automobile and new highways created the suburban boom, completely remaking American life. This map just does such an incredible job of visualizing the Great Migration. I mean, look at these corridors. You can literally trace the lines from places in the southeast right up the coast to New York, and then you see this other powerful stream flowing from Mississippi and Alabama straight north to Chicago and Detroit. This wasn't just a move. It fundamentally remade America's northern cities. So, all of that history leads us right up to the single biggest migration story of the last 50 years or so, this unbelievably dramatic population shift from one corner of the country to another. And here it is, that entire shift in one simple image. You can just feel this powerful current of people flowing out of America's industrial heartland, what we call the Rust Belt, and heading south and west into the warmer Sun Belt. So why the big shift? Well, it's a classic story of push and pull. The Rust Belt was literally pushing people out as factories shut down and those manufacturing jobs vanished. And at the exact same time, the Sun Belt was pulling people in with new jobs, a lower cost of living, and, let's be honest, this was a game changer, a much more pleasant climate, all made livable year-round by air conditioning. And this quote, wow, it just nails the economic engine behind this whole thing. Think about it. In just a couple of decades, the manufacturing power of the Rust Belt was basically chopped in half. But that economic energy didn't just vanish into thin air. It flowed south and west. People were just following the jobs. And get this isn't some old story from a history book. It is happening right now, big time. Just look at Texas. In a single recent year, it gained more than 470,000 people. To give you some perspective, that's like the entire population of Atlanta, Georgia, picking up and moving to Texas in 1 year. Okay, so that brings us right up to today. That Rust Belt to Sun Belt story is obviously still a huge piece of the puzzle. But what do the latest patterns tell us? Where are Americans heading right now? This map from just a couple of years ago tells a wild story. It's pretty simple. If a region is green, it means it's gaining people from other states. Any other color? It's losing them. And just look at that. The entire South is green. It was the only region in the country with a net gain of residents. Everywhere else was losing people. And if you think the map is dramatic, check out the raw numbers behind it. The South gained over 650,000 people from the rest of the country.
Now compare that to the Northeast, which lost almost 400,000. That's a million-person swing between just those two regions, and it is all pointing south. So what's the bottom line today? Well, the South is still the undisputed champ when it comes to growth, with states like Florida and Texas leading the charge. And what's interesting is that within these booming areas, people are pushing even further out, into the suburbs and the exurbs. But there's a new wrinkle in the story, the environment. For really the first time, we're seeing things like wildfires and hurricanes becoming major push factors that directly influence where people decide to live. Okay, so people are moving. Big deal, right? Well, actually, it is a huge deal. All of this movement has these profound, real-world consequences for everything from who holds political power to your wallet to the natural world around us. Here is maybe the clearest, most direct example of how migration equals power. After the 2020 census, states that gained a lot of people, like Texas, which got 2 new seats, and Florida, also gained more seats in Congress. And on the flip side, states that lost people or just didn't grow as fast, like California and New York, they actually lost seats. More people literally equals more political power. It's that simple. And the ripples just keep spreading out from there. Economically, right, a shrinking state loses tax dollars for things like schools and roads. Politically, those congressional seats we just talked about also translate to more votes in the Electoral College. And environmentally, all these booming Sunbelt cities are now having to grapple with the consequences of that success, things like water shortages and just endless urban sprawl. And that, of course, brings us to the future. With the explosion of remote work and the very real impacts of climate change, the American map is once again being redrawn right before our eyes. The Great American Migration never really stops, so the only real question is, where will it take us next?
For more content like this, subscribe to Paperful.